Everyone without prejudice was at the slot machines, playing cards at the tables and engaging in every other manner of chance game possible in the hopes of striking it big and making a small fortune. For those not engaging in some type of gambling, there was also dining tables set up all throughout the casino where a mixture of men drinking and puffing thick cigars, shooting hard whiskeys and women daintily sipping on fine champagne and smoking long, slim cigarettes could be seen enjoying the jovial atmosphere. The large bar at the far back had men and women alike, some paired, some not, making varied types of conversation on its counterside stools. Of course, the predominant demographic seated at said bar was either the slick-dressed Casanova trying to woo the woman of his particular fancy, or the poor drunken sap who was all but passed out with a bottle in his hand and his clothes in disarray. This being most likely due to self-pity and despondency after trying, failing and losing more than was gained after a night of bold gambling in the ever-enthralling attempt to make it big. Outside of the opulent interior of the casino, which came complete with a crystal chandelier almost the size of the one back at the Golden Magikarp, as well as the black pant, red vest wearing employees who were either serving food, running the tables or serving alcoholic drinks and finger foods on trays to patrons, there was also the almost constant presence of black-suited men all throughout the room. For the most part these stony-faced, black glasses-wearing men were spaced sporadically around the casino, carefully watching the proceedings going on around them just in case anyone got up to any mischief amidst all of the frivolity. Furthermore, the suits weren't alone, as the walls lining the casino were filled with cameras, all observing the goings-on below with a steely, unblinking constant vigilance. One thing was for sure, no one could accuse the game lounge of having no vigilance. Among the sound of slots rolling, voices merging together in an endless drone of never-ending conversation and the announcements of the employees running the actual tables themselves, Ash looked around through the slight haze of smoke shrouding the room and then coughed. So this is what my mom always called a hotbed of sin. He coughed again and then shook his head. Gotta say, already not a fan. Giselle, whom even though currently resembled an 18-year-old young woman more than old enough to engage in the atmosphere around her, coughed as well and made a disgusted face. It smells terrible in here. The only person that really didn't seem surprised or taken aback by the sights, smells and sounds going on around them at the moment was Brock. And that was only because the currently golden brown-haired, no longer squinty-eyed young man was all but drooling at the sight of the scantily dressed escorts who were hanging off the arms of many of the more well-to-do, affluent gentlemen gathered in attendance. "Ah, wow. I think this place is amazing," he said in a flighty tone, his cheeks red and a little bit of drool coming from his mouth. "So many pretty girls." Misty's eyebrow twitched in the form of her own guise before she whispered to him in an impatient tone. "Now isn't the time, Brock. Get a hold of yourself." Suddenly, one of the red-vested casino employees came up to them from a podium directly in front of the entrance and gave a welcoming smile. A smile in which, even though seemingly genuine, had Ash and the others secretly wondering inside if the brown-haired man before them was a secret rocket agent pulling duty as a lounge worker. "Hello sirs and ladies, are you here for a specific attraction tonight? A game or two in the casino perhaps, or maybe even a round on the battle stage? Or mayhaps a simple, quiet dinner and a fun attraction to keep you busy in our all-ages family area would be more your speed?" The four of them shared a look between each other before Ash looked back at the still smiling man and answered him. Well, see, this is our first time here so we don't exactly know what all you have to offer. We just heard about this place on our way through town and decided to drop by and see what it was like." "Ah, of course." The vested employee with too big a grin responded as he clapped his hands together. "Well, you certainly selected the right venue for your entertainment needs because our game lounge is without a doubt the hottest spot in all of Kanto." He then turned and gestured at the casino before them. "As you can see, this room houses our inter-regionally famous casino. People come from all over Kanto and even Johto just to get a taste of the thrilling adrenaline rush and heart-palpitating excitement that party-patting in our offered games gives you. Of course, as I'm sure you can understand, there is an age restriction to the patrons that are allowed to stay on this side of the lounge. He then turned and gestured in yet another grand motion at a large oaken door to the left of them. Through that door lies our glamorous battle stage. A place where trainers can pit their Pokémon either against each other for cash prizes or against some of our highly trained battle directors. He turned back to them and held up a finger. If you want me to give you a little inside info, battling against other trainers on the battle stage is fun and all, but taking on a battle director is where the excitement is really at. She was almost afraid to ask since she knew the place was owned by Team Rocket, but Giselle decided to do so anyway. So, what's the difference between battling another trainer or a battle director? She asked nervously, feeling trepidatious for the answer she was going to get. Still grinning ear to ear, the casino employee let out a small laugh and then winked. Why, instead of winning cash prizes against a battle director, you instead battle for the chance to win a Pokémon. And there it was. The devil in the thick of the fold. What Ash, Giselle, Misty and Brock knew they were probably going to find out about the game lounge, but whose suspicions had just been confirmed. Oblivious to their mindsets, however, the man continued on. Naturally, what makes the competition of fighting one of our battle directors so thrilling, aside from the prospect of winning a Pokémon, is the fact that the Pokémon you yourself battle with is also up for grabs at the same time. If you lose, that's it. We officially win ownership of your Pokéball. The words that came out of the creepy man's mouth was almost as creepy as he himself was. The only difference was that his boisterous revelation had all four incognito trainers feeling a combined, instantaneous mix of both horror and disgust. They knew that Team Rocket's primary means of income and criminal activity was Pokémon trafficking, and what better way to run one end of it than by putting up Pokémon ransom battles. So, you actually allow trainers to gamble their Pokémon? Ash finally asked, the current brown hair and similar colored eyes he sported going a long way in helping along the ruse he had going so he could show, even to some small degree, his disgust without being suspected. Oh yes, of course. The casino concierge replied cheerfully. Why, in fact, it's one of our most lucrative and popular services that we offer here. Typically, the level of battle director you defeat will dictate which Pokémon you may choose from the selection we offer. The more powerful the director, the better the prize. Why would anyone want to actually gamble their own Pokémon when you could just battle another trainer for prize money instead? Giselle asked in a tone of utter disbelief. Oh well, that's simple. He replied enthusiastically. Sure, you battle for boring old money, but why do something so bland when you could instead fight to win a real-life Pokémon instead? Not to mention, playing such a high-stakes game really spikes the adrenaline, in both the competitor and anyone watching. Ash and the others shared a glance between one another for a moment before the odd man turned around and gestured at another large wooden door on the opposite side of the casino entrance. Now through that door lies our family gaming and dining room. Fun for all ages, family-friendly and a great place to just go have fun and unwind. Our all-ages corner stands proudly as one of the most visited recreational areas in the whole region. Holding up a hand, he counts off on his fingers. We have a fully functioning, kid-friendly gaming area, a dining room, a prize exchange corner for all the coins you can win playing our games, and even a Pokémon daycare center. You know, for the trainers that want to just relax and take a load off without needing to worry about their Pokémon. He finished the last part with a wink that had all four friends practically curling their lip up in disgust at the thought of anyone affiliated with Team Rocket caring for their own Pokémon for any amount of time. So, he clapped his hands. Do you have any idea of where you would like to start, or would you simply prefer to explore on your own? It took all he had to act in a civil manner with the casino concierge, but Ash managed to smile through his teeth and reply. I think we would like to just explore on our own actually. The man nodded. Very good indeed. Now I assume the four of you have proof of your age through some means of identification. He put a hand to his cheek. I know it's a bother, but casino rules and all that, you know. Misty and Giselle's eyes widened only barely noticeably at his request. None of them had thought to cover the need for a physical way of proving their false ages, and now, with a simple question, it seemed as though their whole ruse might have been up faster than it even began. Ash. The boy suddenly heard in his head, recognizing it right away as Ghastly. Luckily for you, I've already taken into account this very scenario. Check your pockets, I left some photo ids in them for you. Hearing that almost made Ash want to drop the illusion and kiss his Pokémon right then and there, but, knowing time was of the essence, he reached into his back jeans pocket and pulled out the small card his fingers felt. After withdrawing it, he held the card out to the casino employee and spared a glance at it as he did so. When he did, Ash almost smiled, since right there, printed clearly as day, was what looked like a driver's license with his persona's fake name, Red Fire, as well as height, weight, hair, eye color and age. Which conveniently displayed the legal age of 21 for all to see. The man looked at the driver's license and, apparently satisfied, nodded before looking at the others. Brock, Misty and Giselle, apparently putting two and two together and realizing Ghastly had been the cause of Ash's save, reached into their own pockets. For Misty it was a small slit in the side of her red skirt, and were relieved to find cards of their own waiting for them. After showing proof of their identification to the eccentric, odd doorman, he carefully scrutinized each one before smiling toothily and making a grand gesture with his arms. Well, now that that's settled, ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy all we have to offer at the funnest place in Kanto. The group of four offered nervous, half smiles at the man before hurrying away from him and then huddling together near one end of the stairs that lead down into the main gambling area. So where should we go first? The disguised Giselle asked in a hushed tone, to which Ash replied after looking around for a few moments. I think we should go and check out that battle theater place or whatever it's called in here. Remember. He looked around a few times before lowering his voice again. We're here to find the entrance to Team Rocket's secret base. Might as well check each place to be thorough. After deciding, the four friends headed to the big wooden door to the left side of the main room, and there had the doors opened for them by two uniformed employees, whom did so with a small bow. As they passed into the next room beyond, they found that it was almost as big as the one they had just left. The new room looked more like a giant hall with black and white checkered floors, a rectangular dining area full of tables and chairs, and the ceilings were high and vaulted all the way to the very top. Off to the far right side was what looked like some kind of a prize exchange table, and at the very front of the room, a massive grand stage took up the entire back wall. What was more, the entire room was absolutely packed full of people, at tables and even standing off to the sides. Hey, look. Misty spoke as she pointed towards the stage. There's a Pokémon battle going on. Indeed, up on the stage a young teenager with dark brown hair was battling his Golbat against a black-suited man who was wearing a cape with a black eye mask over his face. He had silver hair that stood up on end and was slicked down at the sides, poking above the mask enough to be visible, and he himself was battling with his own, powerful-looking, Golbat. Golbat use Supersonic. The brown-haired boy yelled as his Pokémon screeched its name, flitted into the air and then let out a loud screeching sound, a sound in which sent yellow rings of confusion-inducing power at the other flying type. The silver-haired man merely smirked under his mask though and then called out, his voice resembling someone who was either perpetually lazy or far too disinterested with life. Golbat, use haze. In a flash of impressive speed, the bigger Golbat flapped its wings rapidly and caused a thick dark haze, like fog, to suffuse the airspace above the stage. And that fog was exactly where the rings of Supersonic went into. That was a good move. Brock observed. Using haze created a cover for that other Golbat to hide behind. Seconds later, they heard the suited man call out again. Air Cutter and Confuse Ray. Within seconds several spinning blades of razor-sharp wind came flying out of the cloud of murky haze and went straight for the other Golbat. Seeing his Pokémon in trouble, the boy yelled. Golbat, try and get out of the way. The Pokémon's speed was impressive and it did indeed manage to avoid the blades of air, but they proved to be merely a cover as the other Golbat suddenly flew out of the hazy cloud with its eyes glowing ominously. Unable to avoid the surprise attack, the smaller Golbat got caught up in the confused Ray's rings of yellow energy and immediately fell into a swirly-eyed confusion. Seeing this, the caped man smirked and called once more. Now Golbat, Venoshock. Out of its wide-open mouth, Multiple blasts of toxic purple power shot forth from the bigger Golbat and repeatedly impacted the smaller one in several punishing direct assaults. With a cry of pain, the smaller of the two identical breeds was then sent hurtling towards the stage by a wing chop courtesy of the bigger one's wing attack. Plummeting towards the stage below, Ash and his friends almost cringed when it hit the floor while the Golbat's trainer yelled in desperation, "Golbat! No!" Almost as if he knew victory was his, the masked trainer had his own Golbat disperse the haze covering much of the stage and then held out his arm as it flew down and perched on it perfectly. Seeing his Pokémon was unable to battle any longer, the brown-haired teen dropped to his knees with tears in his eyes and cried out. "No! Golbat! Golbat, no! I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." In a tone that was as bored as it was during the battle, the masked man approached the kneeling boy and smirked down at him. "Ah, I'm so sorry you lost. But hey, you battled valiantly, at least you'll have the memory of your last brave fight with your Pokémon before you lost it." Looking up at his conqueror, the young man all but begged while still on his knees. Please. Please don't take my Golbat, please. I'll do anything, anything I swear. Please just don't take him." His voice showed nothing but false sympathy as the other man shook his head and raised his finger. You knew the rules of the battle stage before you accepted this challenge against me, a battle director. If we bent the rules for you then we would have to do the same for everyone else too and we just can't do that. He then held his hand out. "Now come on, give us its Pokeball, come on." The teen simply stared down at the floor blankly for several long moments before finally reaching into his pocket, pulling out his unconscious Golbat's Pokeball and then handing it to the man. Taking it without a care in the world, the masked man returned the knocked-out Pokémon back to its ball and then spun it on his fingertip before catching it and smiling. "Thank you kind sir for participating in the battle stage contest. We hope you had fun and please feel to return any time for another match." Almost as through all life had been taken from him upon handing his Pokeball to the suited battle director, the young man slowly got to his feet and then trudged depressingly off the stage with his head hung low. Back with Ash and his friends, all of them were still in a manner of shock at what they had just seen. He just lost his Pokémon. Giselle whispered in a heartbroken tone. "So quickly, that man just took it. That guy we talked to when we came in wasn't lying." Brock stated as he crossed his arms and narrowed his eyes on the stage and the silver-haired man still standing upon it with a microphone now in his hand so he could address the crowd and call for more challengers. This battle stage thing really is high-stakes Pokémon battling at its riskiest. You either come out a winner or you lose everything. I can't even imagine it. Ash narrowed his eyes as well, though they were trained specifically on the silver-haired masked man as he spoke in a low voice. "That guy. I know who he is. His voice, his hair. I've battled him before." Giselle looked at her boyfriend in surprise. "You have? When? You never battled anyone like that when I was around." He shook his head and replied in a whisper. "No, it was before you joined us. Team Rocket was trying to pull off an operation at Mt. Moon and that guy up on stage, he was one of the guys in charge of the whole thing. I battled and beat him. I know it's him too, his voice is way too familiar." Misty looked towards the stage and scrunched her face up in thought before realization dawned on her. "Hey, you're right, it is him." She whispered back. "I can't believe it." Brock scanned his eyes around the room then and looked over at Ash, his voice also a low whisper. "I don't see any doors or back rooms here that looks like what we're looking for. The prize counter and back behind stage might lead somewhere but." Ash nodded, understanding before his friend even finished. "Yeah, it'd be way too risky, you're right. Let's try one of the other rooms." With that said, the four disguised trainers quickly left the battle stage hall, happy to leave behind the sight of such depressing high-stakes Pokémon battling and the arrogant man up on stage that they could tell was visibly preening from his brutal victory over his former opponent. Once back in the main gambling hall, Misty leaned over and whispered to her friends as they walked down the stairs and into the game floor area. "I don't see any place in here that we could sneak into easily either. That bar at the back of the room looks like it might lead to the kitchens but, should we try sneaking back there?" It'd be tough. Ash shook his head and whispered back as inconspicuously as possible, each of them trying to appear as though they were interested in the attractions around them so as to not attract any attention to themselves. No, the rocket guy the first interrogated back on the Saint. Ann told me the entrance to the base was in a back room. I assume he probably meant a storage room. Giselle looked at a slot machine near her and appeared as though she were interested in playing around as she spoke over her shoulder. Kitchens have storage rooms, we could try sneaking one of us back there. Brock was forced to take a drink in a blue martini glass from a scantily dressed serving lady, doing so while trying his best not to act as though he had never such a thing before, which he indeed hadn't. We could, but it'd be hard. The place is packed, security is everywhere, cameras are on the walls, and those kitchen doors have people coming in and out of them constantly. His eyes followed the backside of the serving waitress as she walked away to another table, his cheeks struggling not to turn red as they did so. I don't know how we did it. The incognito former gym leader almost squealed aloud in pain due to Misty stomping down on his foot from beside of him, her voice coming in as a hiss next to his ear. Now's not the time to be a pervert, Blue. While his older friend struggled not to vocalize his pain or spill his drink at the same time, Ash spared a quick glance towards the bar and the two doors on either side of it that lead to the kitchen beyond. Afterward, he scanned his eyes quickly over the room, taking in most of the cameras on the walls and the suited men standing off in the corners in the process. Giselle has a point though, the secret entrance could be in the kitchen somewhere. I think I might have a plan, but you guys will just have to play along and trust me. At that moment, they all heard Ghastly's voice telepathically speak to them. Listen, all of you, I can help use my powers to cause a distraction or create a little scene, if need be. I apologize I forgot to tell you this earlier, but I should also let you know now that you can use my telepathic abilities to communicate with each other mentally while wearing the watches that keep your disguises activated. It links you to my power and also to each other so you don't have to remain together at all times. Ash nodded and then whispered to his friends again. Then let's split up for a minute and disperse. I'll make my way towards the bar, and once I'm in position, I'll let you know if I think of a plan. No words were needed as the other three simply gave silent nods and then began venturing out on their own. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX looking older man ordered as he gave his menu to the woman whom had taken it. Even though it went against every fiber of her nature, the magenta-haired beauty smiled sweetly as she replied in a similar voice, "Coming right up, sir, thank you so much." Though, as she turned to walk away, the smile she had adorned morphed into her usual uppity scowl as Jessie grumbled to herself, "I hope you choke on it, you old toe rag." Taking the pad of orders she carried with her all the way back to the right side door that lead to the kitchen next to the bar, Jessie marched into the bustling food preparation area where a large group of Pokémon were hard at work running the operation. As she walked back to the area of the kitchen where the fryers and stoves were located, the temperamental woman left her latest list of orders on a line of string suspended from one rack to another, putting them in perfect line for the cooks to see. "I have another 5 orders here, what's taking so long, you two?" she demanded in an impatient tone as Jessie scowled at her 2 teammates, whom were currently slaving away as fast as they could by a stovetop and fryer. "It's not as easy as you think, Jessie," James yelled back while simultaneously flipping a burger patty and chopping up a head of lettuce on the counter nearby. His outfit consisted of blue pants, a light blue undershirt and a white apron with a hairnet trapping down his blue locks. "You trying churning out 3 dozen orders a night with an angry macho breathing down your neck? Yeah, Jess, give us a little break." A certain talking Meowth chimed up in his unique accented tone while he stood on a stool in front of a fryer vat dressed in a similar outfit to James, right down to the hairnet. Except one was also on his tail. "Dat macho's a total slave driver and he don't take excuses too well." His paws each worked a fryer dish while sweat continuously beaded at the top of his brow from the heat. Dressed in her uniform, which was a simple black pants, red vest and black undershirt combination, Jessie growled back, Look, if you two don't pick up the pace and show some mettle, we're going to be stuck in these dead-end positions forever. And it's both of your faults we got landed here in the first place. Our fault. James complained back in a whining tone as he flipped the frying meat in front of him and diced the veggies behind. How is it our fault? Because, if you two wouldn't have made such a mess of that Butterfree capture operation and got the Team Rocket warehouse destroyed, the admins wouldn't have punished us like this. Hey, it's not our fault. Twerp and his twerpy pals just so happened to be there and stopped our operation. Meowth snapped back. I planned dat ting down to Daletta, and if it wouldn't have been for twerps, we'd a had all dem Butterfree. Jessie glared. I don't care why it happened, all I care about is getting out of this kitchen and doing something finally worthwhile. So get to it. We aren't ever going to get out of here and capture that Pikachu to prove our worth to the boss unless we. At that moment, Jessie saw Meowth and James both stiffen up in terror just as she felt a large presence suddenly step up behind her. Blinking a few times, she turned around just in time to see the large fighting-type Machoke, who had been made their boss, towering behind her as it glared down at all three of them. Machoke. It vocalized in a tone that left no question to the fact that it wasn't very patient, or understanding. Machoke, Machoke. Machoke, choke, choke. Oh, of course, sir, yes, sir. Jessie replied quickly in a nervous, rushed voice, her face sweating nervously as she held her notepad up to her chest and smiled as reassuringly as possible. I was just coming to tell these two to pick it up and drop off a few more orders. Satisfied bellies are satisfied customers after all. Behind her, James and Meowth were now working so fast they looked like they were on overdrive. Why, yeah, we don't want people outside to go hungry, that's for sure. Right, James? Meowth called out over the fryer as he rapidly worked his arms up and down. That's right, Meowth. James replied over his shoulder with a too-wide smile on his face, his knife-cutting hand now moving so fast it was all but a blur. No one loves the patrons more than we do. The supervising Machoke scanned its narrowed eyes over the three bumbling excuses for rocket agents before giving what must have been a final growling command for, hurry up. And then turning to lumber away. Jessie kept the smile on her face until the muscled fighting type disappeared, to which she sighed in relief at and then looked back before griping once more. Just don't do anything to mess this up, you two. She received nothing but dirty glares in reply, even though Meowth and James were well used to her attitude by now, and then turned to leave the kitchen so she could resume her waiting duties in the dining room. However, just before she left the kitchen, Jessie passed a small mirror hanging near the door above the handwashing station and stopped to admire herself for a moment. Specifically, the recent change to her appearance. Ever since her hair had caught fire during the failed Butterfree capture operation a short time back, Jessie had managed to salvage her look into something she had come to actually prefer quite a lot more than her old hairstyle. Her new look had her long magenta hair massively shortened from its former length, now stopping just below her upper back. It was all straightened perfectly, down to the last strand, while she kept the right side of her face, namely her right eye, mostly covered by a portion of hair she brushed forward. After inspecting her appearance for a few moments, Jessie moved a single stray strand back into place and then winked at herself before stepping out of the kitchen and back to her job. Ash stopped off by a card table on his way towards the kitchen and pretended to focus on the game currently being played amongst who he all but guaranteed by their look had to be high rollers. In the meantime, he eyed the suited men standing in the corners of the room as they slowly turned their head this way and that in order to be on the watch for anyone trying to cheat the system or act in any unscrupulous manner. Turning his head farther to the side, he managed to catch a glimpse of Misty and Brock over near a set of slot machines, the former trying her hand at a game while the latter watched her, one eye on Misty and the other on the events going on around them. Farther along still he saw Giselle sitting over at another slot machine, and it was at about that time that Ash finally, casually, made his way over to the bar. Leaning up against it nonchalantly, Ash's eyes flicked over towards one of the two kitchen entrances nearest him. Unfortunately, he didn't account for the bartender suddenly speaking up and getting his attention. Hey, what'll you have? The slick-looking, smooth-talking young man asked with a smile. Ah. The currently brown-haired, disguised Ash looked around at the other patrons sitting at the bar and scratched his head before gesturing to the man sitting next to him and the drink he had in his hand. I suppose I'll just have whatever he's having. The bartender gave a nod and then quickly set about preparing the martini drink Ash had unknowingly requested. A few seconds later he placed it down in front of the actually underage young man and gave a two-fingered salute. Enjoy. He bidded kindly before heading down to the other side of the bar to take care of someone else. Ash turned and inspected his drink for a few moments and then took it in hand and sniffed it before looking around. Not wanting to act unusual or out of place, he brought the blue-stained glass to his lips and slowly took a sip of the strange drink. As soon as the foreign liquid touched his lips and passed over his gums, Ash almost immediately had to refrain from letting out a violent cough, especially as it passed down his throat and into his belly. All the long way down his gullet, the young trainer had never felt the strangest combination of sweet, yet bitter fire that met his tongue, nor the odd sensation of a liquid flowing down his throat that was actually somewhat thick and had a kind of quantifiable texture to it. While he couldn't say the strong alcoholic taste or the slightly bitter sensation it left immediately in its wake in his mouth was pleasant, Ash also couldn't necessarily say that it was entirely an unpleasant experience. Namely, the primary sweet taste of whatever the drink had been mixed with, combined with the way it warmed his stomach once it reached said destination, was actually quite pleasant and in fact, he licked his lips after the small ordeal was said and done with. After experiencing his first ever drink, Ash saw the man beside of him tip his martini glass up and drain it all the way down. Upon seeing this, and also due to his desire to make sure he appeared as though he fit into the normal crowd as much as possible, Ash decided to do the same, just to keep up appearances if nothing else. And so, with a steeled resolve, the pallid native brought the glass up to his presently transformed face and promptly shot the whole drink in one go. Almost as soon as this happened, the boy's eyes popped out of his head and he quickly had to turn down towards the bar top as the small little burning in his belly from earlier morphed quickly into a full-on blazing fire. If the sizzling gut wasn't enough for his young constitution, the almost suffocatingly strong alcoholic taste that filled his mouth indeed was. And to be honest, it took all he had not to visibly show how stunned he was after shooting the martini glass down and then receiving such an unexpected surprise. Once he was recovered somewhat, Ash gave a small cough into his hand and then looked towards the kitchen entrance near his seat again, which already had another waiter coming of it with a tray of food in hand. Finally deciding to make his move, Ash focused on Ghastly's presence in his wristwatch and then spoke aloud in his own mind, praying that the telepathy actually worked. Hey guys, can you hear me? He asked into his mind. It took a few moments but the thought eventually hit Misty first as she looked up a little from the slot she was playing. Yes, I hear you, Ash. Brock and Giselle gave their own affirmative replies to his question, each one taking a moment to marvel at the strange sensation of speaking mentally, and as soon as they did so, Ash spoke again. Good. Well, listen then, because I have a plan for how I'm gonna get into the kitchen. I'm going to have Ghastly stir up a distraction, a big distraction, and then as soon as it begins and everyone is focused on it, I'm going to make my way to the kitchen. You guys got that? He received an affirmative reply from his friends, leading Ash to speak to Ghastly in his mind. Okay, Ghastly, you see those slot machines near Brock and Misty? I want you to make them erupt the coins they have inside of them to cause a big distraction. He heard Ghastly merely give a cackling chuckle in reply before, seconds later, he saw the slot machines near his friends start to shudder and shake. Then, within the span of a few more moments, the tops of the machines quite literally blew off and sent coins by the hundreds spewing into the air. This quite naturally caused an immediate uproar as everyone in the room, after recovering from such a shock, charged towards the spewing fountains in order to grab some of the coins raining down like a bounty from heaven. Ash almost cheered to himself when he saw the men in suits, security, take off from their positions and run toward the scene of chaos in order to restore order. Of course, this gave him the perfect opportunity he needed and he promptly took it. Without causing so much as an eye to turn his way, Ash slid into the kitchen via the left side entrance and walked down first the sharp right hallway he found, then turned left again as he finally stepped into the kitchen proper itself. Almost immediately he found himself about to run nose first into the massive chest of a mean-looking Machoke, which glared down at him and then vocalized in a deep voice. Machoke. Mach Machoke choke. Waving his muscled arms above his head, he continuously gestured at Ash, leading the fast-thinking boy to shift his gaze right and left for a fast solution. As he glanced around the kitchen and then back at Machoke, the boy incognito was able to deduce, rather quickly in fact, that by the way he saw several bipedal Pokémon working away quickly in the massive kitchen, such as Kadabra, Machop, Mr. Mime, Hypno, Hitmonchan and even a Chansey, they were most likely the ones solely responsible for preparing the food. More to the point, aside from the random waiter or waitress coming in and out of the kitchen, Ash was prone to believe that, amazingly enough, humans were not involved in food preparation whatsoever. Of course, given that the Pokémon he saw all had reputations for being very intelligent, he wasn't all that surprised. Focusing on the Machoke in front of him again and deducing by its actions that it was most likely the boss of the kitchen, Ash smiled nervously and rubbed the back of his head. Yeah, right. See, I'm one of the new busboys. I don't have a uniform yet though, so they told me to just grab an apron and get to work until they get me one tomorrow. I'm real sorry boss, those are my orders. Machoke looked down at Ash quizzically for several moments before grunting and then shaking his head in frustration. With a final terse nod and some kind of barking order, the ill-tempered fighting type wandered off, leading Ash to sigh in relief before slipping further away into the kitchen. Finding where they kept the cooking aprons hanging a few moments later along with the station where they kept the busboy trays, Ash quickly decked himself out to blend in so the human waiters didn't cast any suspicion on him. Afterwards he started looking for the kitchen storeroom, thinking that if there was any kind of a backroom as the rocket grunt he interrogated for information back on the Saint and told him, it would most likely be found in the kitchen. Eventually, he caught sight of what he was looking for, which appeared to be a sort of pantry or freezer behind a large steel door. However, before he could make his way to it, Ash heard the familiar sounds of two voices he immediately recognized. Taking cover behind a rack of spices and bread, he peered around the corner and saw, to his surprise, James and Meowth, dressed in cooking aprons and hairnets, working away quickly at their individual stations, each one sweating profusely as they did their jobs intently. He could hear the two rocket members saying random things back and forth between each other, but it wasn't until he saw the third member of the team suddenly appear wearing a waiter's outfit that Ash's eyes truly widened. I've got 2 more orders for Tentacruel soup and Magmar's firebread. The loudest of the bumbling rockets commanded. Hurry up and get to it because I don't have all night. Give us a minute, Jesse. James whined as he sloshed soup from a pot into several bowls. I'm moving as fast as I can and I haven't even had a break yet. Yeah, put a sock in it, Jess. Meowth fired back as he rolled the dough for what looked like some kind of pie. We're da ones making da food while you're out there gussyin' it up with da customers. Growling under her breath, Jessie slammed her tray down on the countertop and snapped. Don't you talk to me like that, furball. You know I'm not a server, I'm born to be served like the royalty I am, this is painful for me. She then clenched her fist and looked away scowling. When we see that twerp and his loser friends again, I'm going to make him pay for being responsible for putting us here because of that stupid Butterfree job. Hearing that, Ash's eyes slightly widened again, realizing that she was talking about the time they tried to steal all of the Butterfree during their mating ritual and he and his friends stopped them. Almost chuckling to himself since their intervention had apparently been what landed Jessie, James and Meowth in kitchen duty at the casino and thereby caused them to stop chasing after he and his friends, Ash smiled slightly in amusement. Hey, good, serves them right. However, just before he slipped away again, Ash took a minute to observe Jessie's new hairstyle and, despite not being able to stand her since she was a Pokémon thief that had been plaguing him ever since he left on his journey, he couldn't deny that the new look really did accentuate the beauty that she did indeed possess. Shaking his head to clear it of such unpleasant thoughts, Ash hurried over to the metal door at the farthest end of the kitchen and opened it as silently as possible. Stepping inside and cracking the door behind him, Ash found the light switch and flipped it on, the room becoming bathed in a soft low light that showed rows upon rows of frozen meats and other spoilable foods on multiple shelves, revealing that he was indeed in the freezer. Rubbing his shoulders due to the chill he felt greet him after ditching the apron and busboy tray, Ash wandered into the freezer and started looking all over for anything that might even slightly resemble a Persian portrait like the rocket grunt told him about. As he walked all the way back to the shelves at the far end, he knelt down and tried to examine the wall behind the food that littered every single corner of the shelves. Unfortunately, even after inspecting the shelves for several minutes, he was unable to find anything closely resembling a picture. And for Ash, every second he spent scouting the storage room with the door only partially closed risked his exposure with each passing moment. Just as he was getting ready to give up his search and walk out, Ash stopped at the corner of the junction where two shelves on two opposite walls met up, end to end. As he halted and leaned in to examine the small crack that existed between the opposing shelves, Ash put his fingers as high up in the crack as he could and then ran them all down the length of the crease, just as a test to satisfy his suspicion. Just as his fingers came down to about midway of the height of both shelves, however, he suddenly felt them brush up against something that felt rough, instead of smooth. What was more, as he flexed his fingers and pulled back ever so carefully, he noticed the shelf to his left side move outward, ever so slightly, until it was no longer even with the other shelf. Feeling his excitement spike at the find and his heartbeat pick up by a pace or two, Ash allowed his fingers to explore the rough part he was on until, with a pushing motion, he felt something give way, almost like a button being pushed. As soon as that happened, Ash heard what sounded like several clicking sounds resonate from the other side of the wall, followed by the entire shelf shaking softly. Pulling back on the hole his fingers were now reaching in, Ash stepped 2 paces behind himself and, to his amazement, the whole shelf pulled out with him, just like a swinging door on hinges. After the shelf swung fully open, the young man was astounded by the sight of a thick, shiny metal vault door now greeting his sight that looked just as impenetrable and high-tech as it did secret. Drifting his eyes downward, he soon spotted what appeared to be some kind of automatic locking system that had a keypad input panel as the only discernible way of opening the door. Taking a few moments to examine the advanced-looking code pad keeping the door shut, Ash bit the inside of his cheek in thought before looking back at the freezer door. Making his mind up, the boy ran back to the door and pulled it all the way closed, hearing the freezer door click closed after he did so, signifying that he was now locked inside with no other way out. Knowing he now only had one way of escape, Ash ran back to the heavy blast door and knelt down to examine the keypad lock. Ghastly. He spoke to his ghost type through their current telepathic link. Can you help me open up this lock? It's code encrypted and I know I won't be able to decipher the code. He heard Ghastly hum in thought for a few moments before replying. Well, I won't be able to decipher the code, but I believe I will be able to break the lock. It might take a few minutes, but I should be able to infiltrate the system with my psychic powers and destroy it from the inside. Just give me a spell or two to work my magic. Ha 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 ha. Ash shook his head at his Pokemon's incessant need to joke at every chance he could, before responding in turn. Thanks, Ghastly, but please hurry, we're in sort of a precarious situation right now. Instead of a reply, Ash saw a blue bubble of psychic energy surround the keypad of the door lock, which let him know that Ghastly was already starting to infiltrate the electrical system with his power. While he waited for his intelligent and powerful Pokémon to do his work, the disguised trainer spoke through his mind again, this time to his friends. Guys, can you hear me? To which he heard all 3 of them reply at the same time. We hear you, Ash. How is everything on your end? Giselle asked in concern. Are you okay? Did you get in all right? Yeah, I'm fine, Giselle, don't worry. Ash replied. But I need to tell you guys something. Apparently there was another way into Team Rocket's HQ here. I found it in the kitchen's freezer and it's definitely not what the grunt back on the ant told me about. The door is locked by an electric code system and Ghastly is trying to disable it now. He soon heard Brock speak through the link. Are you sure he wasn't lying and you just didn't find the real entrance by lucky mistake? Ash shook his head even though no one could see him. No, I don't, I really don't. He was being tortured and he thought he was going to die on the end anyway. There really wasn't any reason to lie, maybe he just didn't know about this one. But either way guys, you need to go and see if you can find that original entrance because there's no way you'll all be able to make it back here without getting caught. What about you? Misty asked. I'll be fine, he replied. I'm going to go on ahead as soon as Ghastly finishes up here. I'll be fine guys, don't worry. You just focus on finding a way down and then we'll find some way to meet up. They didn't like the sound of it but Brock, Misty and Giselle all knew there was no other way to go on. So, wishing their friend well, they cut the connection and then met up together in a corner of the casino while everyone else was still distracted by what Ghastly had done to the slot machines. Silently nodding to one another, they casually made their way up out of the lower ground level of the casino and up onto the small elevated entrance area. After gathering together up near the main entrance doors, the three disguised friends focused on the large door to their immediate right, which lead to the last area of the game lounge they had yet to visit. Making their way over to the door, which was opened for them by two fancily dressed employees, Brock and both ladies found themselves standing in a rather interesting atmosphere, to say the least. In some ways, the large room looked like a cross between a fancy family dining restaurant and also some sort of equally fancy recreational, kid and family fun area. Like the casino in the last room, the restaurant area was situated in a large circular dip in the room to the entrance's direct left side. The floor was a golden marble color. The chairs and tables all looked as expensive as could be. The pillar columns of pure marble appeared flawless in design. The walls and ceiling were painted in ancient antiquity fashion and the clientele appeared just as high-rise as the patrons in the casino itself. The family gaming area on the other hand, was a vast departure from the dining area. The two ends of the room were only separated by a large, low-height partition wall just high enough to where you could barely see over it if you were not standing atop the entrance platform at the main door. The partition wall itself was adorned in plants and flowers of varying types, though almost all were leafy and broad to help hide the family gaming area behind them, and there was even an aquarium built into the center of the wall with an equally varied variety of different water-type Pokémon. From where they were standing, Giselle and the others were able to see that the family gaming area was split into two parts. One part was where the family fun itself took place, with things like an indoor rock wall to scale, family-friendly slot machines, an arcade area and several other random games and entertainment facilities that parents and their children could do together. There was even a large room with the words, Pokémon Day Care, above it at the farthest end of the room. The second part seemed to be an area just for kids and comprised of a massive jungle gym area where young children of all ages looked like they could go and play. Furthermore, as they panned their gaze to the front left end of the room, where the partition wall ended, they saw a long counter that was separated in half by a thick glass wall with a single door leading between the two sides from restaurant to family play area. As they looked closer at the two divided parts of the long counter, it seemed as though the one on the side of the restaurant served as a concierge desk as well as a host station. The side of the counter on the other end of the glass partition wall, on the other hand, appeared to be some kind of a ticket exchange, prize desk by the many different types of prizes that looked to be kept behind that part of the counter. Wow, this is new, I've never quite seen a setup like this before. Misty commented in casual interest as she looked all around the room. Yeah, but we're not here to admire the scenery though, Brock commented as he looked down at the restaurant below them. We need to try and find that backroom Ash talked about and then meet up with him somehow. Giselle looked around herself for a few moments before whispering, I don't see any backroom on this side of the room, I don't even see a kitchen. That's probably because the only kitchen is the one in the main room, in the casino. Brock observed as he watched a waiter go up to where they had been at the entrance and disappear through the door. The waiters probably just go from place to place. Let's try the other room, Misty suggested as she gestured to the other side of the room. It was a suggestion that they tried as the three of them walked over to a door in the middle of the partition wall and crossed over into the family game room. As they explored the large room for a few minutes while attempting to appear as inconspicuous as possible, Misty eventually caught sight of a door at the far back of the room, right behind the large kids' jungle gym. Guys over there, that might be it, she whispered, leading Brock to nod and then look around before silently gesturing for the two girls to follow them. It only took a few short moments to cross from where they had been to the jungle gym itself, and after arriving at the door in a shadowy part of the room, Brock looked up at the ceiling just to assure there were no cameras watching them. Seeing no surveillance monitors, no kids at the jungle gym, nor any casino employees anywhere nearby except for the woman running the prize counter, which was out of their range of sight, Brock reached for the door handle and jiggled it, finding the knob locked as a result. Darn. He cursed under his breath. You two keep a watch out, I'll try to get this doorknob open. However, before Brock could ponder on how to open the door, he saw a blue bubble of energy surround the handle, followed by a soft clicking sound to emit from it soon after. There we are. The three of them heard Ghastly's voice announce in their heads. I suppose when it comes to doorknobs I just don't know when to stop picking at them. Ahahaha. Brock, Misty and Giselle merely shared a look of amused exasperation at Ghastly's tireless corniness and then hurriedly opened the door before rushing inside so no one would see them. It's so dark, Giselle complained. Somebody find the light switch. A few seconds later, bright light flooded the room, causing them to temporarily shut their eyes against the glare, before opening them again to see that they were now in a rather small-sized storage room. This must be it, Misty stated while Brock locked the door back behind them to keep away any suspicion. This is a storage room, do you think it could be it? Who knows? Brock replied as he walked up to join the two girls in looking around the small room, which was stacked with shelves, boxes and cleaning supplies. This is a huge place with probably a lot of back rooms. Who knows if this could be the right one or not? Well, we aren't going to know unless we search, Misty advised as she started to look around the room. Now come on guys, help me out. And so, the three friends started scouring the storage room for any sign of anything that might end up being a secret entrance of some sort. It wasn't until Giselle made the announcement of, hey, look at this, a few moments later that they finally hit pay dirt. Moving a box away from a stack near the wall, the currently disguised brunette revealed the portrait of a Persian hanging on the wall. That's it, Misty exclaimed in excitement as she rushed over. That's the picture Ash told us about. Yeah, but Brock got close and examined the portrait. I don't see how this thing leads to any secret entrance. He continued to inspect the picture and ran his hands along the surface, frowning in focus as he eventually decided to check the back of it. Wait a minute, I feel something, you too, Brock informed after feeling his fingers rub over something odd behind the picture. Taking it off the wall, Brock and the two girls gasped as they saw a red switch embedded in the wall where the picture had been hanging. I wonder what it does, Giselle asked, more to herself than anyone. Nonetheless though, it had the effect of making Misty curious enough to walk up and press the switch. As soon as she did, all three of them stared in amazement as the wall right beside of the portrait slid back, up and then to the side, revealing a dark passageway beyond with stairs that lead down into only Arceus knew where. Looking at one another, they seemed to share a silent agreement and then nodded in tandem before following Brock down the stairs, their only thought at present being to meet up with Ash and reunite the group once more. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX keypad of the code terminal in front of him began sparking and smoking before exploding silently in a burst of sparks. Covering his face and stepping back, the young trainer from Pallet looked at the large steel blast door as the lights above the locks turned from red to green, signaling the unlocking, and then slowly swung open. However, to Ash's quite pronounced confusion, he noticed that, after the door opened all the way, the only thing on the other side was a small square room, not even 5 feet across and 8 feet high. What confused him the most though was the sight of a white circular pad in the center of the floor. A pad that, seemingly, served absolutely no purpose whatsoever. The boy in a man's disguise walked up to the pad and knelt down as he examined it. Huh, strange. I've never seen anything like this before. He debated with himself for a few moments, but then just as he was about to reach out and touch it, he heard Ghastly speak quickly in his head. Ash, don't. Wait. He immediately stopped his hand as his Pokémon continued in his mind. I don't know what that is, but I sense psychic energy radiating from it. It feels like it is some kind of technology mixed with psychic-type Pokémon power. The young trainer stared at the odd pad for several seconds before furrowing his brow and speaking out loud. I'm sorry, Ghastly, but I have to try. I've come too far to turn back now. With those words said, Ash reached forward and touched the pad. As his fingers touched the surface, he felt the strangest tugging sensation which quickly morphed into a full-on jerking motion as he felt his whole body being yanked towards the pad. Then, in a sensation that made the other feel pleasant by comparison, he felt himself seeming to shrink and the world around him spinning into a void of nothing but shapes and colors before. Instantaneously, he suddenly found himself sitting on the floor in an entirely different area. Blinking several times and then shaking his head to clear it of the haze there, Ash focused his swimming gaze on his surroundings and found that he was now sitting in what appeared to be some kind of laboratory. Standing up on shaky legs and regaining his normal motor functions, he couldn't help but comment aloud. Wow, that was intense. So that's what it was. He heard Ghastly say mentally. I knew I sensed psychic energy. Somehow that pad you touched was made with the capability to teleport human beings, very similar to how psychic types are able to do the same thing. Ash looked around the small lab he had ended up in and then responded aloud again. Well, I don't so much care about how I ended up here, just the where of it. He then started to slowly walk around the lab while looking at all of the equipment, computers, desks and papers which were arranged all throughout the room. Unfortunately, he didn't have time to take in his new surroundings before the door to the lab opened up and a man wearing a white lab coat with short blue hair walked in holding some papers in his arms. As soon as the scientist, as he appeared to be, spotted Ash, he stopped right in his tracks and blinked in shock. His eyes then darted over to the teleporter pad before those same bespectacled eyes widened. Intruder. The man turned and went to flee out of the lab. An intruder. Thinking fast on his feet and realizing now, by the man's reaction, that he was most likely inside the Team Rocket's secret base under the casino, Ash pointed the hand with Ghastly's wristwatch at the scientist. Ghastly used disable and stop him. The scientist was stopped mid-step, right as his hand was reaching for the door, leading him to look like he had suddenly become some kind of statue. Running over to the man, Ash threw him to the ground and then got on top of him while grabbing the scientist by his coat collar and glaring at him. Is this Team Rocket's secret base under the game lounge? He shook him again. Talk. Terror was on the man's faces, while his body was frozen due to disable stopping the last thing he did, which was move. He could still talk. Who are you? The scientist felt his world exploding into stars moments later as Ash's fist connected with his face, almost breaking his nose and succeeding in cracking his glasses as his face turned to the side from the blow. Turning the man back to face him again, Ash demanded in his disguised self's deeper voice. I asked you a question. Answer it or there'll be more in a second. He raised his fist again, leading the cowardly doctor to stammer out, why yes. Yes it is. Please I'll tell you whatever you want, just don't hit me again. Ash almost rolled his eyes at the wimpy man's pathetic resolve but focused on pumping him for information as he demanded again. What is that thing that took me here? Where am I in the base? The terrified scientist stuttered back. It was called a teleporter pad. Sylph Company developed them as a means to travel faster between 2 points, we just stole the design. It works by harnessing a combination of technology and psychic-type energy to teleport someone to wherever the 2 pads are linked. And you're on the research level of the base, this is where we perform all of our experiments, it's level 2 of 4 floors. Ash shook him again. What about the Pokémon? Where do you keep them? They're scattered all throughout the base on all 4 floors. We keep them in cages and some in special locked rooms and labs. The angry trainer glared dangerously. What about all the important files your organization keeps on your projects and business dealings? Where are they? The terrified doctor of science blinked rapidly. Filing and information is on the first floor, but you'll mostly only find account and financial information about Team Rocket's laundering and trafficking down there. We don't keep information about other bases on site, and the admins had all of our project and operation blueprints moved out of this base a few weeks ago, but I don't know where to. Ash gritted his teeth and silently cursed at that revelation as the scientist pleaded. That's all I know, I swear. I'm just involved in research and development, low security level access, and I'm new here too. I don't know much, please. Looking into the man's eyes, Ash could see he was telling the truth, so he asked for Ghastly to put the doctor to sleep using hypnosis. As soon as he was out, Ash stood up and then dragged the man over to a corner behind one of the big machines before heading to the door. Stepping out of the lab, he found himself standing in a big hallway that led in 3 different directions. 1 to the front and 2 to the side. He wondered to himself as he looked which way to go. Guess I'll try left. The disguised trainer then took off cautiously down the left side hallway and followed it as it led him down straight for a few seconds before veering to the left again sharply. Just as he went to take his next step, however, Ash's foot landed on a floor tile which caused it to glow red. At that moment, a low, buzzing alarm sound started to ring in the hallway, leading Ash to stop in his tracks as he cursed to himself. Within moments he heard footsteps hurrying down the opposite hallway from him, and soon thereafter, 2 rocket grunts in their stereotypical black pants, long shirt with a red R hat, gloves and boots appeared and spotted him. Hey! You there! Stop! Intruder! The 2 rockets almost simultaneously took out 2 Pokeballs and threw them out, releasing from them Eradicate and a Golbat. Knowing he wouldn't get out of it any other way, Ash simply pulled out 1 Pokeball from his alter ego's belt and pointed the ball out in front of him as his deeper voice said simply, "Charmander, I need you." In a flash of light, the small fire-type lizard materialized in the hallway with his eyes narrowed and embers of flame leaving his mouth. "Radicate, use Crunch." The 1 rocket called out, followed by his partner yelling something similar in Golbat Supersonic. Unfortunately for them, the well-trained Charmander didn't need anything from Ash but a simple, "Go Charmander." And he took off like an arrow. Just as the rings of Supersonic came to reach him, Charmander rolled to the side while opening his mouth and releasing a stream of billowing black smoke into the air. Smoke which filled the hallway and caused Radicate to lose its bearings. On the rocket grunt's end, all they could see was black smoke in front of them before the black started to become illuminated within with bright patches of red. Seconds later, both of their Pokémon, Golbat and Radicate, came falling out of the smoke cloud charred like a piece of coal, courtesy of Charmander's flame. Looking ahead nervously, all they could do was stare in shock as Ash and Charmander emerged from the smoke, their eyes widening only long enough for the fire lizard to open his maw and release yet another powerful jet of flames, this time at them. The screams of pain that followed only lasted a short few moments before both grunts dropped to the ground unconscious, just like their Pokémon. Smiling down at Charmander, Ash nodded and thanked his Pokémon before returning him and then hurrying down the hall, over the 2 passed-out rockets. Turning a corner and heading down another hallway, Ash felt his foot sink a little and quickly stepped back to see that he had stepped on yet another trigger tile. Gritting his teeth, the young man was expecting to hear another alarm, but instead, the floor tiles all out in front of him for several spaces started to glow white before, in a teleportation-like phenomenon, several Voltorb and Electrode suddenly appeared in front of him. Stepping back several more spaces from the well-placed and deadly trap, Ash thought on his feet again and pulled out another Pokeball. Bulbasaur, come out. As the starter grass type emerged from the ball, Ash was forced to command quickly. Bulbasaur, use sleep powder. Bulba. The small quadruped grass type called out as he rooted himself to the ground and sent a spray of light blue powder into the air, which drifted over all of the angry-looking Electrode and Voltorb and rather quickly put all of them to sleep. Seeing the way now clear that the electric types blocking his path were asleep, Ash returned his Pokémon and continued down the hallway while carefully stepping around and in between the exploding Pokémon. Coming to a door near another junction in the hallway he was in, which went straight and also split to the right, Ash opened it up and cautiously stepped inside, soon wishing he had not due to the room being full of both scientists and Team Rocket grunts everywhere. Eyes widening, he only had enough time to say a curse to himself before the 4 rocket grunts in the room turned towards him and, obviously being able to tell he didn't belong, yelled out, "Halt, intruder!" Before he could react, Ash saw Pokémon appearing from Pokeballs faster than the eye could blink while the scientists in the room stood back to defend themselves from any potential harm. Seeing no way out, the young Pokémon master in training quickly pulled out 2 balls of his own and called out Squirtle and Charmander. Faced with the odds of 2 to 4, their opponents being a Growlithe, Grimer, Coughing and Zubat, Ash smirked and looked down at his Pokémon. "We may be outnumbered you two, but let's show them that numbers don't matter." At that moment, the Growlithe's trainer ordered it to use a flamethrower while Coughing was commanded to use Sludge Attack and Grimer was told to do Toxic. Zubat, meanwhile, had been instructed to use Screech. Like a perfectly coordinated team, Squirtle and Charmander moved in perfect tandem. The first thing they did was clamp their hands over their ears to resist the Screech attack that was meant to throw them off. Squirtle then leapt in front of Charmander and used Withdraw while in midair, followed by Rapid Spin, this essentially creating a spinning shield in front of the fire type which protected him from the incoming attacks. Just before Flamethrower, Sludge and Toxic could hit their mark though, Squirtle, who was now on the ground spinning upwards like a top in his shell, blew a large bubble out of his head hole which encased his shell. This served the added purpose of defending the water type's already hard shell from taking too much damage. As soon as all 3 attacks impacted the makeshift defense barrier, immediately stalling in the process, Charmander started to glow behind his partner's shell. As soon as the 3 attacks had beaten themselves out on Squirtle's shell, the bubble popping on impact but serving its general purpose, Charmander jumped up and perched himself atop Squirtle's shell, which was now ceasing to spin and resting perfectly on end. Opening his mouth, Charmander released a powerful blast of draconic energy from within in the form of Dragon Rage, which soared at the 4 other Pokémon and hit its mark with a resounding boom. The lab room was filled with wind and smoke for several seconds, but after it lifted it showed the unconscious forms of all 4 rocket Pokémon, including their trainers, laying out cold on the floor. Ash looked up at the 3 scientists in the lab, who were now cowering in fear of him in the corner, and pointed at them. "Squirtle, Charmander, attack!" The scientists yelled in fright and pleaded for mercy, but their screams were drowned out by the roar of Charmander's flame and Squirtle's gushing water, leaving the 3 of them slumped out unconscious against some of the large equipment in the room seconds later. Ordering his Pokémon to follow him, Ash left the lab and went back out into the hallway where he heard the footsteps of more rocket agents coming down the opposite hallway from where he was. Upon also hearing the footsteps temporarily halt and a voice yelling out, "Someone attacked these 2. We have an intruder, spread out and find him." Ash narrowed his eyes and looked down at his 2 Pokémon. "The only way we're gonna succeed at this is to fight these guys, stealth just isn't gonna work, there's too many." He heard the footsteps coming their way again, leading Charmander and Squirtle to instinctually ready themselves again. Seeing this, Ash rooted his feet to the ground and nodded to himself. "Fine, if we have to take on every rocket in this place we will. I won't back down now. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX made their way through the maze-like underground complex of the secret base below the game lounge. I know, but the fact that we've already seen several rockets says that we're definitely in the right place. Giselle commented as they quietly rounded another corner after looking to make sure no one was around. So far, the three of them had managed to avoid detection, and after sneaking into an empty office room, they found a floor plan which showed that they were currently on floor 1 of 4. Yeah, but something must be up. Brock stated as he cautiously opened up another room and peeked inside, only to see another dark office. I think we've seen about 15 rockets running through this place in the last 20 minutes alone, and they all looked like they were heading in the same direction. He shut the door and then had to open it again just as quickly and rush the two girls inside with him, shutting it quietly behind them due to two more rockets running past the office in the same direction all the others had went. Peeking through the blinds of the window in the door, Brock shook his head and whispered, "Something has to be going down somewhere in here, these guys are in a frenzy." "Do you think it could be Ash?" Giselle asked in concern. "He is ahead of us and he could be on one of the lower floors." "Could be." Misty nodded. "After all, he doesn't necessarily shy away from a fight." Brock nodded as well. "That could be true. And if it is, we need to get to him to back him up. That means we have to get off this floor." Cracking the door open again and not seeing any more rockets coming his way at the present moment, the former gym leader whispered hurriedly, "Now's our chance, go." Shooting from the office, all three trainers made their way quickly through the many halls of the first floor and eventually managed to find a doorway with a sign next to it showing that it was a staircase leading to the next floor down. Flinging the door open and hurrying inside, Brock and the other two began rushing down the staircase, which twisted and turned downward to the next level. Upon reaching the exit door and opening it up, all three of them became shocked at the sight awaiting them. The hallway stretching before them was strewn with the unconscious forms of several rocket grunts, as well as their Pokémon. The hall itself even looked like the site of a massive battleground due to the chunks missing in the floor, walls and ceiling, as well as the scorch marks, discarded leaves and soaked floor and walls which could be seen everywhere they looked. "Holy Arceus!" Misty breathed in awe as they slowly stepped out into the hallway together, the redhead needing to step over the prone and grumbling figure of a beaten grunt in the process. Do you think Ash did this?" Giselle asked with her expression etched into one of disbelief. "That's gotta be why." Brock answered as they continued to step over the unconscious Pokémon and rockets. "They wouldn't have done this to each other." After wandering through the chaos-strewn halls for several minutes, seeing nothing but a wake of destruction everywhere they looked, a pained coughing caught their attention and made them look over towards a barely conscious grunt who was sitting against a wall with his uniform in tatters. Brock ran over to the man and knelt down in front of him, grabbing the grunt by his collar and holding him back against the wall while demanding in a rough voice, "What happened here? Tell me." The grunt focused his eyes on Brock and coughed again before responding. It was incredible. I've never seen anything like it. This guy came out of nowhere with his Pokémon. They were like a hurricane. We couldn't stop him. Didn't stand a chance." Before Brock could demand any further information, the grunt passed out in his grasp, leading him to frown in frustration and stand back up. Darn it. He and Misty were suddenly pulled to the sound of Giselle's voice a little ahead of them saying in a whispered tone of saddened astonishment, This is horrible." He and his fellow gym leader ran up to the disguised but still brunette girl and looked into the same room she was staring into. And when they did, Misty and Brock both felt their breath catch in their throats. The room was a large laboratory, almost double the size of the others they had seen during their time on the second level of the base. But what really made it a sight was the rows upon rows of cages, stacked almost all the way up to the ceiling, which were filled with Pokémon. The types, varieties and sheer number of captured Pokémon laying trapped behind the small, cruel cages were almost beyond number to count in any reasonable span of time. What was even worse though was the condition of them. Almost every Pokémon, on top of looking miserable and depressed, all appeared to be malnourished, dehydrated and in many cases, visibly abused. There were also tables, equipment and other medical devices spread throughout the room that were obviously the tools being used for what very clearly was Pokémon experimentation. Some of the tables even still had fur, scales, feathers and dried blood on them. Misty and Giselle looked to be on the verge of both nausea, as well as tears, while Brock gaped with an open mouth as he stared around the room. What really caught his attention though was a table in the far corner which still had a body up on top of it, though draped in a sheet. Slowly, he and the girls walked up to the unmoving form and once they were upon it, Brock slowly, almost shakily, reached a hand up to the top of the sheet and pulled it back slightly to see what was underneath. His fingers let it slip free again within the span of a single second. Stepping back and looking away, Brock blinked his eyes several times to keep them from moistening while Misty and Giselle freely let the tears fall down their cheeks. "This is what did it," Giselle whispered, her voice thick with grief as she glanced around the lab again. "Ash loves Pokémon so much, if he saw this, it would have set him off." Brock finished for her in a solemn tone. "No wonder we were seeing all of that destruction on the way here. He must have seen this as well and it set him into a rage." "Do you think," Misty began with her voice taking on a serious hint of concern, to which Brock turned to her and shook his head. "No. If he would have lost control like that again we probably would have known. This whole place might have been in the risk of getting destroyed." He then walked over to the center of the room and looked in one of the cages where a despondent-looking Ponyta was being kept. "No. I think he just got mad. Really mad." Turning back around, Brock locked eyes with Giselle and Misty. "But I can understand why. I don't know about you two but I'm feeling mad as hell right now too." Misty nodded, wiping her tears away as her hands balled into fists. "Let's find Ash and take out these vile slabs of filth together." "But, why didn't Ash set these Pokémon free?" Giselle questioned in confusion. "I can't see him just leaving them in these cages like this." "And then what?" Brock asked her. "Letting these Pokémon free right now would have unleashed chaos. I think Ash left them here so once we're done, the police can handle it the right way. A lot of these Pokémon look like they're in bad shape so I'm sure they'll have to bring down a medical crew to tend to them first." Misty slowly nodded in realization. "Not only that but, as big as this place is and being that this base is a big center of Team Rocket's trafficking, there's probably going to be more places like this in this base somewhere." There was a moment of silence amongst all three of them at that sobering, but most likely very accurate statement. The reality of just what kind of a horrible hell they had stepped into only really now hitting like a bolt of Pikachu's thunder. It was the realization that when you stepped into the dark, evil world of the criminal underworld, the revelations and realities that awaited you were nothing less than a stomach-churning nightmare. "Well look, we can't dwell on any of this now," Brock reasoned. "All we can do is go catch up with Ash and help him take this base down. We do that and we can get all kinds of help here for the Pokémon, but Team Rocket has to be dealt with first." The two young ladies nodded in agreement and then followed Brock as he led them out of the lab and back into the hallway full of unconscious rockets. Traversing their way as quickly as possible through the second floor, all while stumbling upon more unconscious rockets and rooms full of caged Pokémon, they eventually saw the door leading to the third level just ahead. However, just as they were about to reach it, a large Ursaring of a man dressed in a rocket uniform, with a big bushy beard, stepped out from the adjacent hallway and stood in front of the door. His arms were crossed over his chest and the towering man had a scowl of pure unnerving seriousness on his face. Brock, Misty and Giselle stopped in their tracks upon seeing the man, who narrowed his eyes at them and finally spoke in a deep, baritone voice. "Stop." He flexed his huge arm muscles reflexively. "You are intruders." The man's dark eyes seemed to glint dangerously, in a way that sent shivers down the three young trainers' backs. "I cannot allow you to pass, whoever you are. I can tell this guy is trouble." Misty whispered loud enough for her two friends to hear. "And he looks familiar too." Giselle whispered back before her eyes widened and she whispered again, just loud enough for the other two to hear. "Wait, he's the one that was on top of that airship that Team Rocket escaped on back on the Saint Anne. He's the guy that tried to kill us." Brock narrowed his disguised persona's eyes and quietly replied back. "Yeah, and I get the feeling he's just as dangerous without an airship." "Are we gonna have to fight him to get past?" Giselle asked with a small tremor in her voice. Brock held his hand back to the two of them and shook his head. "No. You two go on ahead and find Ash. I'll fight this guy myself and catch up with you afterwards. Don't argue, just do it." Misty looked nervously between the huge man and then Brock. "Are you sure, Brock? This guy might need all three of us to take him." The older of the three shook his head. "No, that will only waste time." You both need to go ahead and help Ash, I'll take care of this myself. Just trust me. But how are we gonna get past him? Misty whispered to him. He's blocking the doorway. Brock looked at the tall, muscular man for several long moments before eventually getting an idea. Knowing it was reckless but still needing to try, he quickly pulled out a Pokeball from his side and threw it while yelling, "Onyx, use your tail and get that man out of the way of the door." In a flash of bright light, the mammoth rock type materialized with a roar of its name while hunched over to avoid hitting the ceiling. All of it happened within mere seconds, which obviously took the bearded man by surprise as Onyx managed to wave his tail around and then struck him in the side, sending the man skidding back across the hallway he had just come from. Go. Go now, you two. Go. Brock yelled as he ran towards the door to the stairwell with his Pokémon in tow. Seeing their opening, Misty and Giselle ran for the door and just managed to throw it open and escape through the other side as the Rocket admin stood back up and brushed his shirt off. Getting to his feet but not saying anything right away, he simply stared at Brock and Onyx as he pulled out his own Pokeball. You are going to regret that. The former pewter native widened his stance in preparation for the battle ahead just as the man, who was unknown to Brock as being Riken, one of Giovanni's top admins, enlarged his own ball and called forth from it a Pokémon of similar type, nature and ferocity to Onyx. A large, ferocious and powerful-looking Raiden. You're outmatched, boy. The bearded Rocket growled. And you will be crushed. Not today. Brock rebuffed valiantly as he pointed and yelled out, Onyx, use slam on Raiden. Unix. The large rock type bellowed as the crunched Pokémon whipped its tail around at Raiden, only for the other strong Pokémon to catch it in a tight grip in its arms like a vice grip. Eyes widening, Brock called out again, Onyx, use, but he was cut off by Riken grunting. Slam it, Raiden. Flexing its muscles and grunting like its trainer, Raiden whipped Onyx into the side of the wall with incredibly impressive speed. As Onyx cratered the wall beside of it and fell down to the ground, Brock heard Riken command again. Use Mega Punch. With speed matching its strength, Raiden came up on Onyx and threw a hard, glowing fist into his face, the blow knocking Brock's Pokémon back across the hall and doing great damage to it in the process again. Sweating, Brock murmured to himself. This is looking bad. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX square-shaped laboratory room with high ceilings and large glass tanks set into the floor in the farthest corners of the room.